an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, you Road to Growth listeners. Today I have Michelle Mitchell. She is a co-parenting resolution coach and an attorney. Thank you, Michelle, for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So one of the questions I always ask whenever I have a coach on here, and I know I'm probably already going to know the answer, but the question I ask is, what makes you different from other coaches out there?
I appreciate the question. What makes me different? First of all, the field that I'm in, I'm a high conflict co-parenting coach. So it's already a fairly small group of people who are doing it. But what makes me different even within that group is I've been an attorney for 20 years. And while I don't practice family law, I've been in litigation for it'll be 20 years in November. So I've been in the trenches of litigation, and I know sort of the pitfalls with going to court, the upside, the downside, the toll that it takes on people. And I also have had my own high conflict co-parenting relationship. So I kind of come with experience in a lot of different ways.
And this is going to be a very, very general question, so it might be hard to answer. What's more painful, dealing with two companies that are fighting each other in court, or two parents fighting each other during the coaching aspect?
I guess it depends on what you mean by difficult, but I would say, family court it's brutal because there's just a lot more at stake. I like to say that in family court, there's really no winner, even if, you win on paper. It takes a toll emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, not only on the parents, but also on the kids. So definitely, I would say family court is more difficult, more painful.
Makes sense. I mean, well, let's rewind. I mean, a young Michelle, was she into resolving conflict? Was she the kind of the peacemaker of the family?
It's interesting. As soon as you started to ask that question, the first thought that popped into my mind, I was the youngest of 3 kids. And I would say that my role was always kind of the glue, like trying to repair any issues within the family members. My sisters were older than me, still are older than me, and they were both kind of more like motherly towards me. That was their role. And as we got older, whenever there were, rivalries within the family, I always tried to force reconciliation and repair those relationships. So.
And what was the plan at a young age? I mean, was it getting into law? I mean, what were your plans for the future when you were younger?
Yeah, that's another good question. So I grew up in a family where, my parents really never talked to me or any of us about college or what we wanted to do with our lives. And so my sisters and I kind of had to navigate it for ourselves. I never really knew, at least as I can remember, I didn't have I never wanted to go to law school. And I always was drawn to the psychology majors. I ended up going to college and got my degree in psychology and a minor in philosophy. And then I had applied to a joint program where I was going to get my PhD in psychology and my law degree, because I always thought, as a lawyer, I'll be able to support myself better. And ended up going the law route and ditched out on the PhD route. So here I am back following my true passion, which is much more aligned with psychology than law. But I definitely, use all of the skills that I've brought when I'm working with my clients.
So getting your PhD and law degree at the same time seems like it was a pretty daunting task. I mean, was it the magnitude of it that pushed you directly to law, or what happened during that schooling?
Yeah, the program itself was kind of strange. It was like you started out in the graduate degree program, and then the next year you did your first year of law school, and you alternated, which I doubt they're still doing it that way. But so that program in general seemed like it was not a good idea. And why did I choose law? I think I had created a story in my head and told myself that, I'll make a lot more money and be more successful and be able to support my family one day if I'm a lawyer. So I went with the one that seemed like the easier, or I guess the more guarantee that I would be able to support myself.
And then how does that transition from basically studies to actually joining the workforce?
From law school?
Yeah, from law school.
I mean, they don't really teach you about practicing law. They teach you how to, review cases and apply the law, I guess, or apply the facts to the law. But law school isn't really a practical school. It's not like a training ground. So, but I actually really enjoyed law school. It was an interesting experience. And I feel like going to law school trains, really what it does is it trains your brain to look at things in a different way. And that's something that, I'll never unlearn. So definitely a lot of value from law school. And I've practiced for 20 years. So.
And so you're practicing law in a firm. Throughout that time, were you always in a firm, or did you actually start your own firm, or what was that process like as an attorney?
Yeah, I started out with a firm, and I was with a couple of different firms for quite a number of years, and then in-house with a company. There was a period of time for a couple of years when I first started coaching that I was also practicing law on my own. Got my coaching. I got certified with Martha Beck as a life coach about 13 years ago. And then just recently, last year, got my certification with the high conflict diversion co-parenting program.
So as a coach, was that the first time that you had your own business?
Pretty much. I mean, other than there was like a year or two as an attorney that I had my own business, but I would say my current business, my coaching business now, is the first time I've been a business owner.
What was the mindset, the ideas, and how long did it take for you to actually take the step into coaching?
Well, I'm kind of a quick start. And so once I get something in my mind, I kind of run with it. And so it was pretty quick. I had been coaching on and off throughout the years, but it was about, over a year ago where I really kind of put things into motion and started launching into a full-blown coaching practice.
What was, were you getting coaching? Where did the idea of becoming a coach kind of come from?
The idea of becoming a coach came from becoming familiar with Martha Beck and her work, all of her coach training and books that she's written. That was, more than a decade ago. But then what got me into coaching with high conflict co-parents was about 9 years ago. I found myself in a very high conflict co-parenting relationship. And I immediately started working with someone named Brooke Olson, who's my mentor, my coach, and I coached with him for years. And from the very beginning, I knew that that's what I wanted to do with my coaching business. And I knew, that I wanted to be able to take something that was a very difficult period in my life and do something positive with it. So yeah, I've been coaching with Brooke Olson for like 8 years, and he's the owner of the coach training program that I did, the high diversion co-parenting course.
Being that you were dealing with, I guess, your own struggles with, co-parenting, and then you had your coach, what was that point in time when you felt comfortable to help other people on their journey?
I would say that I've fairly soon after I started working with people who I kind of became the go-to person for anyone who knew what I was going through and was also going through something like that. So I would, get friends of friends reaching out to me and help them navigate their high conflict co-parenting relationship. But, I still had a lot of my own work to do. And I think it was a few years ago when I had a conversation with Brooke that it was clear to me that he saw my path forward, and could tell that I had done a significant amount of work on myself. So I would say over the past several years.
So most of the people when you first started in the business were people that you knew and knew of your own kind of struggles, I guess, correct?
In the beginning, definitely. That's not the case now, but definitely in the beginning.
So were you okay sharing your journey with basically family and friends? I mean, being an attorney, being a coach, I mean, sometimes some coaches, some attorneys put themselves maybe a little bit higher, and you don't want to show your kinks in your armor. So was it any kind of scared or no?
Yeah, I'm sure I was feeling apprehensive, but I also really embraced it, because I think in order to be able to be a good coach, you have to sort of let that mask go. And I think it actually really helps my clients knowing that I've been through it. So I think they see it as a strength that I went through a high conflict co-parenting relationship. I know how to get out of one. And it just, if anything, that experience alone helps me understand where they're at in their journey.
How do you judge the line of giving them your journey, but also allowing their journey to be kind of heard? I don't know if that question makes sense, but how do you judge that line when you're working with a client?
I'm not sure that I actually judge the line per se. I think it's more that my experiences help to inform how I help them tackle what they're going through. So for instance, just a quick example with my personal situation is that I would often when I didn't understand how high conflict works, I would request what I thought was, a very straightforward swap, like, hey, can we swap this day for this day? Which would turn into a huge nightmare. And so like one of the things that I work with my clients on is set your life up so that you don't have to ask for those exchanges. It might mean that, if you celebrate Christmas, that you celebrate it on December 20th instead of the 25th, because every time you try to seek an agreement with a high conflict co-parent, there is room for the whole thing to blow up, and then your holiday's ruined. So my personal experience in that informs how I help them get out of the mess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What are some things and you've talked about the idea that you've learned from your own kind of past experience, kind of help your clients better. I mean, what are some things that you've learned over the years that have made you a better coach than when you first started?
I think looking at how I, like that example, ways that I engaged that kept the conflict going, and just really being able to see my piece in it. That was a big one. And then learning how to communicate in a way that didn't engage or keep the conversation going. One of the things that my coach always says is it takes two people to engage in conflict and only one person to end the conflict. And when I talk about that with my clients, at first they're like, well, what do you mean? Because I'm not engaging in the conflict. And it's like, well, I've seen some of the responses that you're sending back, and you're basically giving them ammunition to send back at you. And so really helping them learn that, a lot of the messages that they receive don't even need a response. Or if they do, we keep it. There's this method by Bill Eddy that's called BIF, brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And so we want to make sure that the communications are following that template so that you're staying out of the web.
As a business owner, I mean, what are some things that you've learned? I know you talked about kind of how you teach and how you help people grow. And with the business aspect of it, what are things that you've learned and picked up over the years?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I got when I was first building the business, which is so simple, but it really, really helped me, was it was at a time where I was working with a coach in the very, very beginning. And I was feeling overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, there's so many things I have to do. I have to do a website, a name, and all this stuff. And I was kind of getting lost in the weeds. And his advice was just do the next thing that you have to do. Don't think about the big picture. Don't think about all of the things you have to get done. Just do and focus on the very next thing that you have to do. And for me, that was really, really helpful, to just keep pushing the ball forward and doing that next thing and not getting overwhelmed by all of the, I mean, you're a business owner, all of the pieces that have to come together to run a business.
How often do you look at the bigger picture?
Well, I do work with a business coach, and so we look at it, fairly often.
Okay. So it's kind of like the day-to-day focus on basically what's next, but then fairly
Exactly.
often you focus on the bigger
Look
picture.
at the big picture and breaking, what, in order to meet the overall goal, what smaller goals do I have to set in order to meet those smaller goals, and look at that big picture. But in the early creation days, it really was, okay, I need to, work with someone on getting a website built or whatever it was.
Hmm.
And in the early days, obviously, I spent much more time working on the business rather than working in the business. And that's one of the things that I still struggle with, and my coach tries to keep me on, is spending time working on the business, because I have a lot of business. And so I'm working with clients probably more than I should be. And I should probably focus more on working on the business, but it's a balance that I'm working on.
I think it's a balance for most business owners, is finding that, okay, well, working in the business is basically going to get you that money. Working on the business is going to get you that future growth and leverage.
Exactly. And working in the business is more fun for me than working on the business. So I tend to lean towards that, but it's all important.
So when you talked about it before, about when you were dealing with frustration of kind of being overwhelmed, you just kind of work on the next step and the next step. I mean, is there anything else you do if maybe a client session doesn't work out well, or if basically a situation doesn't work out well? Is it kind of walking away from the situation? Is it doing a workout? I mean, what do you do when you're going through those moments?
I think if I had a client session that I felt like it didn't go well, just being open to learning from the situation and asking for feedback, and taking, the feedback, taking it in, and again, seeing, where's my part in this, and really looking at it and pulling it apart and examining what's the lesson here.
Yeah.
And then taking those lessons forward.
Talking about going forward, I mean, where do you see yourself and your business going forward in the next 5 years?
Well, it's kind of been exploding already. And so I have a whole lot of ideas of where I want to take it, different services that I want to start offering. I just launched my first group coaching program that's actually rolling out next week. I have, just growth, a lot of growth. I see bringing on another coach sometime soon, and offering things on a bigger scale so that I can reach more potential clients, because there's only so many hours, in every day, and it's becoming more difficult for my one-on-one clients to get a session with me. And so being able to offer a bigger scale, get the information out to more people at one time, is really important to me.
What's been, you talking about getting your information out there, what has been your biggest success in getting yourself and your information out there to future clients?
I think one of the services that I offer, which is the ghostwriting, where I help my clients draft responses to their co-parent that, helps keep them out of the conflict. There's not really anyone else doing it that I know of. And it was actually born out of my own experience. I had always wished, oh gosh, I wish there was someone who could read my messages for me, give me the facts, what I need to know, and then respond, so that I don't have to spend time daily getting triggered by these messages. And so that was kind of where that service came from. And it's the one service that my clients pretty immediately have the reaction that, oh my gosh, this has been life-changing for me. And So that's kind of one of the ways that clients find me initially. And then once they settle into that program, they'll usually do, like a one-on-one coaching session, some one-on-one coaching sessions, or sign up for the group coaching. And so I think that's been the one that's been the most successful at really helping people see the results pretty quickly.
The ghostwriting aspect of it, once people, I guess, graduate from hiring you as a ghostwriter and get to able to do it themselves, I mean, is there a rule of thumb of how long you should let an email sit before you respond back so you can actually soak it in, or is that just person to person?
That's a great question. And I would say certainly if you're not working with a ghostwriter who helps you write your responses, 100% there's a rule of thumb. 24 hours, I think, is a really great period of time to wait. When a triggering message comes into their email, or if they're on one of the there's a lot of parenting communication apps. So if they're in one of the apps, or they're getting emails or a text message or whatever it is, it really does take a good amount of time to settle your nervous system, and your body goes into fight or flight. The frontal cortex shuts down, basically your limbic system of your brain takes over. And our brains, as well functioning as they are, they don't understand the different types of fear. And so when the limbic system kicks in, it's the same type of reaction as if we were being chased by a bear. And so it goes into this fight or flight, we're being attacked. And if you write a response in that way, it's kind of like a teenager, right? Teenagers' brains are they're operated much more by the limbic system. And that's why they're so impulsive. And so if you write a message back to your co-parent, you're probably going to write a message that's not really appropriate, and that's going to keep you in that conflict. And so waiting that 24 hours allows your system to settle back down, re-engage the frontal cortex, and write a message that's going to be much more productive, or realize that there's no response necessary. Because a lot of my clients, they don't really know what messages need to be responded to, and they feel anxious. Am I going to get in trouble by the court? So allowing your nervous system to settle back down and really ask the question, does this need a response? If so, what information do I need to communicate? Now, if they're working with me, we don't necessarily need to wait the 24-hour period, because I'm kind of like the filter, and I'm not getting triggered by their stuff. And so I'm still working from my frontal lobe. So I think the answer depends on if they're responding on their own or if they're working with me. But certainly if they're working on their own, I always say, type out the message you want to send, because there's something about, getting that off your chest. Do not send it. Either send it to me or just leave it in the drafts. And then the next day, read the message. Is this really how I want to show up? 9 times out of 10, you read the message and it's like, oh my gosh, there's no way I'm sending that. So I think hitting the pause button really helps.
Is there there's probably not, but I'm just curious, I'm gonna ask a question. Is there a time frame that it takes where it gets easier to put together your emails and not get triggered by the email from the other partner?
You mean for me or like my clients?
Your clients, like for coaching, kind of going through it, like after a couple of months, you start getting better at understanding the email, or is there a time frame, or is it just person to person?
Certainly. I don't know that I would say it's person to person, but I will say that, after a few months, because they're seeing how I'm responding. So they're learning along the way. And so in theory, they can implement that. And that's always, when we go into it, it's always, my goal is to get you set up so that you can learn how to respond to the messages, and then you can take it back over. I will say that it hasn't exactly worked out that way, because once I'm handling it for them and taking it off their plate, they kind of don't want to go back to it. So most of my clients have been pretty long-term, and they really like not having to even like log into that parenting app. and check the messages themselves. Especially when, a lot of my clients have a new spouse or they're remarried, and they realize after they've started working with me how much of a drain it was having on their marriage, or often that's why they reach out, because they do realize what a drain it's having on their marriage. And the step parent is often the one who kind of takes on that ghostwriting role, and they don't want to be doing that anymore. And so they recognize the benefit of not having to engage at that level. And so again, in theory, I think it's great if people can kind of come in and learn how to do it and then take it over. But I'm also happy to do it for them, which seems to be the preference.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for being on the Road to Growth podcast. If someone's listening and they're dealing with a co-parent partner, I guess, that maybe it's not going as planned, divorce, whatever it might be, what's the best way of them reaching out, just kind of getting more information about what you can offer?
Sure. They could go to my website, which is coachmichelle.club. Coach is COACH. Michelle is MICHELLE.club, CLUB. Or on Instagram, I'm Coach Michelle SD. Those are probably the two quickest ways to kind of get an idea of what my services are and how I work with my clients, see some testimonials, or they could always email me. It's info@coachmichelle.club.
I'm going to finish off with this last question. And thank you so much, Michelle, for being on the podcast. I know you work with mostly people that are probably dealing with an issue they're dealing with something before they actually reach out to you. Is there any words of wisdom for maybe people listening that are business owners and they're looking to get into the dating scene and looking to get a significant other that you've learned over the years that they should probably think about before they take it to the next step? Or is that something that pops up?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a loaded question because we all bring into a relationship our past, right? Yeah. And we also bring into our relationships blind spots. And so I think what I would say is, before you take a relationship to the next step, kind of really investigate those two pieces. So what is it that you're bringing into the relationship? What has the person shown you so far? Because if you're not married yet and they're already showing signs of a high conflict personality, I promise you it's going to be much more highlighted once you're married. And if you have kids, definitely it's going to ramp up. Often when there's a high conflict co-parent or a high conflict personality on one end of the relationship, on the other end of the relationship, there's often someone who has codependent tendencies. So just kind of, work with a therapist or whatever it is to really get to know what you're bringing into the relationship and look for the signs of high conflict personality disorders. There's a lot of them out there. And then what was the other piece? I'm sorry, did you ask?
No, that's
is that two-part?
Okay. No, you got it. Again, Michelle, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I mean, I think for everyone, I know we didn't talk in depth with your business, but I think there's definitely some key takeaways in it. I mean, the niche aspect of it, where you're writing emails on behalf of the clients, is something, like you said, is very niche, but it's also been a gateway to actually grow your business. So people out there, maybe in your field, if there's something that not everyone's doing, I mean, specialize in it, because it could be the gateway to exponentially grow your business and have a coach. I think Michelle talked about it multiple times where she has different coaches for different aspects of her business or life. I mean, coaches can be drastically beneficial. I mean, I have a coach. I mean, you should have a coach, at least a sounding board for where your life is going, where your business is going. And if you need a coach, I mean, for your life, for yourself, I mean, reach out to Michelle. Go in the show notes, find Michelle's information. Please subscribe, please share, and go find Michelle. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.